They always said he didn't look like them. Not once, not even a little. And they didn't say it with curiosity or even confusion. They said it with a frown, with suspicion, with rejection. His name was Elian. At family gatherings, aunts would whisper, "Who does he take after?" And his mother never answered. At school, when his sisters were picked up with smiles and hugs, Elian stood quietly by the gate, hoping for just a nod from her, hoping that maybe this time she'd ask about his day. She never did. By the time he was old enough to understand shame, Elian had already memorized the weight of being other. In a house full of warm glances and casual laughter, he walked on eggshells. He was careful not to speak unless spoken to, careful not to cry too loud, careful not to be too soft, too slow, too emotional, because any of those things would earn him that cold, hard stare from his mother that said, "You're not one of us." When his sisters were sick, she made soup and wiped their foreheads through the night. When Elian had a fever, she left medicine by the door. No words, no touch. Once, at age 12, he brought home a school prize. His essay had won first place in the district competition. He showed it to her, heart pounding, eyes wide with pride. She looked at it for 3 seconds and handed it back. "Didn't your teacher see the handwriting? It looks messy. You should work on that." He smiled anyway, because even if the words cut deep, they were at least directed at him. They meant he still existed. His father, Augustine, was quiet, kind in an almost invisible way. He never raised his voice, never challenged his wife. But once in a while, then, when Elian came home late or cried in his room, Augustine would leave a glass of water by his bedside, or a piece of dark chocolate on the table. Small gestures, no explanations. But Elian remembered every single one. As Elian grew older, he began to notice things more clearly. His skin tone matched his father's but not his mother's. His features were sharp like Augustine's, but his sisters looked like they came from a completely different lineage. Still, he never questioned it. In his heart, he believed families were not just built on blood, but on effort, loyalty, and love. He tried harder than anyone. He studied relentlessly. He got into university with a full scholarship and sent half his stipend home each month. He never asked if anyone noticed. He just did it. When his younger sister needed books for her medical entrance exams, he bought them. When his oldest sister moved to a new city, he helped her with rent. Every holiday, he came home with gifts, not expensive ones, but thoughtful ones. And every time, his mother would smile at the daughters, hug them, and place his gift aside like it was an afterthought. One day when he was 22, he tried again. He sat at the edge of the kitchen, watching her cut vegetables, and said softly, "Well, Mom, have I ever done something to make you hate me?" She didn't pause. She didn't blink. She simply said, "Don't call me that. I don't know where you came from." That night, Elian stood in front of the bathroom mirror, toothbrush in hand, staring into the face that had never belonged. He wondered if the only way to earn love in his house was to become someone else entirely. Someone louder, straighter, simpler. Someone not him. But the truth was, Elian had never been ashamed of who he was. He was quiet, yes, and thoughtful, and gentle in the way he moved through the world. He was gay, though he never said it aloud, not because he feared rejection from the world, but because he had already lived a lifetime of it inside his own home. Still, he never let bitterness take root. He worked harder, graduated with honors, became a lecturer, then a professor. And every month, without fail, he sent money home. He didn't do it for recognition. He did it because part of him still believed deep down that if he just tried hard enough, maybe his mother would smile. Maybe she would one day say, "I'm proud of you, my son." But she never did, and Elian never stopped trying. If you've ever felt like the outsider in your own home, stay with this story, Because Elian's quiet persistence will lead to a truth no one was ready for. Subscribe to Heart Stories to follow the rest of this journey. Elian never stopped sending money home. Not when he was promoted, not when he was invited to lecture abroad, not even when his health began to falter. His bank transfers were consistent, on the 5th of every month. Quiet, reliable, and unacknowledged just like him. His sisters grew into their own lives, successful and vibrant. The eldest became a corporate lawyer, the second a pediatrician, and the youngest began training in nuclear engineering. Their achievements were framed on the living room wall, printed in color and wrapped in gold borders. Elian's name was not on that wall. His name, if mentioned at all, was as a footnote. Elian. Oh, he's still teaching somewhere, isn't he? No one ever asked which university had offered him tenure. No one asked how many students had written to thank him for changing their lives. He came home every holiday, brought wine for his father, scarves for his sisters, and something simple for his mother. A jar of herbal tea, a book of poetry, a silk shawl. Each time she'd nod, put it aside, and return to the conversation with her daughters. When his sisters gathered around the kitchen table and shared stories of their cities, their travels, their partners, Elian smiled and listened. He never interrupted, even when he felt the pain rise like bile in his throat. There was a birthday celebration once for the youngest sister. The living room was filled with balloons, laughter, and bright cake frosting. Their mother stood in the middle, arms around all three girls. As someone took a photo, Elian stood just outside the frame, holding his phone like he was checking a message. No one noticed. That night, he sat in his childhood room, the one that still had a broken drawer and a window that never quite closed. He took out a notebook and wrote in the margins, "I exist, I am here, and I will still show up tomorrow." The next morning, he made breakfast for everyone. No one asked who cooked. He knew they wouldn't, and yet the kitchen smelled of cinnamon and coffee. And for a moment, he allowed himself to believe this, too, was a kind of love. But even illusion has limits. One summer, their father fell ill. It was sudden and frightening, a cardiac event, followed by a long recovery. Elian canceled a keynote speech in Geneva to be at his side. He rearranged hospital paperwork, spoke to the doctors, handled insurance, coordinated physical therapy. For 3 weeks, he slept in the corner of his father's hospital room, fielded every phone call, and read him the newspaper aloud each morning. Their mother visited occasionally, sometimes bringing soup, sometimes bringing silence. When Augustin returned home, he said only one thing as Elian helped him climb the stairs. "You're the one I trust most." Elian nodded. He didn't need more. That one sentence filled something hollow inside him. That night, he sat at the dining table, watching his sisters chat with their mother. And when someone asked, "How did Dad manage so well in the hospital?" the mother replied, "It was God's will. He protected your father." No one mentioned Elian. No one looked his way. Later that year, their parents' wedding anniversary arrived. The family threw a small garden party, fairy lights strung across the patio, music from an old record player. Neighbors came by. Everyone toasted the couple. His sisters gave a speech. Elian handed over a gift, a black and white portrait of their parents, restored from a faded photo taken when they were young and in love. Their mother looked at it. Her eyes softened for a moment. Then she turned to the second daughter and said, "You always know what I like. Thank you, darling." Elian stood in the background, watching. That night, he wrote another note in his journal. "Even a shadow casts light. I will be the light they refuse to name." Not long after, the fatigue began. It was subtle at first. Sleepiness in the afternoon, shortness of breath after lectures, a dull ache behind the eyes. He assumed it was stress, the pressure of grading, travel, speaking engagements. But the symptoms worsened. His hands trembled. He lost weight, a cough that wouldn't leave. He went to see doctors, one after another. Tests, scans, Consultations. No answers. Until he visited his uncle, his father's brother, who worked as a senior oncologist. A bone marrow test was suggested. Days later, the results came in. His uncle cried before he spoke. Stage 4. Bone marrow cancer. Aggressive. Late. Elian sat in silence. He did not cry. He did not speak. He simply reached for his notebook and wrote, "I have always waited for her to see me. Perhaps when I am gone, she finally will." The diagnosis didn't scare Elian, not in the way people expect. He had lived with a different kind of illness all his life, a slow, invisible ache called not being wanted. Cancer, at least, had a name, a shape, a timeline. He didn't tell anyone, not yet. Instead, he asked for a few weeks' leave from the university and went home, saying he needed rest. His sisters were surprised but welcoming. His mother said little, only remarking that he looked too pale, too weak. He smiled, as always. Quiet, as always. His father was recovering well. The stairs were no longer a struggle. He spent mornings reading by the window and evenings watering the plants. Elian often joined him outside. Not many words were exchanged, just the sound of wind, of leaves, of two men sharing the same silence. One night, the house was quiet. The others were asleep. Elian found his father in the study, sorting through old papers. Augustin looked up, saw the fatigue in his son's eyes, and closed the folder in front of him. "Sit with me," he said. Elian did. There was no hesitation in his father's voice, just stillness, and something heavier beneath it. "There's something I've never told you, something I should have said long ago." Elian didn't move, didn't speak. "You always wondered why your mother treats you differently," Augustin began. "And I never defended you the way I should have. I owe you the truth." There was a pause, then a breath. "You are my son," he said. "My only biological child." Elian blinked. Slowly, the words didn't land right away. "Your sisters, we adopted them. They came from difficult families. We loved them, of course. But you," Augustin's voice cracked, "you were the only one born to us, the only one who carries my blood." Elian tried to process the shape of those words. They sounded like a miracle and a punishment, tangled in the same sentence. His father continued, "Your mother struggled with it. She wasn't ready for a child when we found out about you. She blamed herself for many things. And then, when she saw you look at tourists like me, she began to see you as a reminder of all she regretted." "I tried," Augustin said, voice low. "I tried to build bridges, but I failed. And I'm sorry, son." Elian looked down at his hands, the same hands that had written scholarship essays, held trembling students, signed bank transfers for a house he didn't live in. Those hands trembled now, and not from illness. He thought of the nights he had begged God to make him look different, to make his voice lower, to make his love for boys go away. He had blamed himself for being strange, for being tiram, for being unwanted. But the truth was never about him. It was about a wound that wasn't his, a war that had nothing to do with who he was, but everything to do with who she couldn't accept. Augustin opened the drawer beside him and pulled out a thick envelope. "This is the will," he said quietly. "I've left everything in your name. The house, the land, the savings." Elian shook his head, lips parted. "I don't want any of it," he whispered. "You earned all of it." Augustin replied, "You carried this family on your back. Your sisters know it. I know it. Whether your mother admits it or not, that's her burden, not yours." There was silence again, not awkward, just long, like an exhale after a lifetime of holding breath. Then Augustin did something he had never done before. He reached over and held Elian's hand. "I don't care who you love. I don't care what anyone says. You are my son, and I am proud of you." Elian couldn't answer. His voice collapsed beneath the weight of years. But in that moment, something shifted. The world didn't suddenly become just. His pain didn't disappear, but it realigned. The boy who never belonged now understood he had always belonged to someone, just not to the person he kept chasing. That night, Elian sat in his childhood room, the same creaky bed, the same flickering lamp. He opened a fresh page in his journal and wrote, "I was never invisible. I was simply buried beneath someone else's shame. But I have always been real, and I have always been enough." In the days that followed that quiet night with his father, Elian began to feel it more intensely, more undeniably. His steps became slower. His vision sometimes blurred. He slept longer, ate less, but still smiled when his sisters made jokes, still helped their father walk down the garden steps, still brewed tea in the mornings for a mother who never thanked him. He told no one about the diagnosis. There was no announcement, no drama. He didn't want pity or a wave of regret too late to mean anything. He simply wanted to feel like a son for as long as his body would allow. He spent hours each day writing letters, journal entries, reflections. But one letter he rewrote over and over, never quite finishing it. It began with the same words every time, "Dear Mother," and always ended with silence. A blank space where forgiveness might live, or longing, or truth too painful to carve into paper. Outside the house, preparations for their father's legacy were quietly underway. Elian met with lawyers in town, finalized paperwork, and reviewed the will again. Everything was exactly as Augustine had promised. The house, the farmland, the retirement funds, all of it under Elian's name. He could have kept it. Legally, morally, emotionally, he had every right. But Elian had never wanted bricks or soil or savings. He wanted something softer, something no title deed could deliver. So he made a decision. He returned to the office one afternoon and signed a new will. In it, he transferred ownership of the house to his sisters, divided the land evenly among them, left a portion for a scholarship fund in their father's name for students rejected by their families, for children who had been told they didn't belong. And he kept one thing for himself, a single letter, to be opened after his death. It was not addressed to the public, not to his siblings, not even to his father. It was for her, his mother, the woman who had brought him into the world and pushed him away from the moment he took his first breath. In the final weeks, Elian no longer moved easily. The stairs felt like cliffs. His fingers shook when holding a pen, but he kept writing. Each morning, at the same kitchen table where he had once been told to eat after everyone else, he now sat and wrote with the quiet power of a man who had nothing left to prove. He saw how his sisters started noticing, how they offered to cook, how they lingered longer in conversation, how the second daughter, the pediatrician, kept glancing at his hands when he reached for a cup. They were figuring it out, but no one said it aloud. And Elian was grateful for that small mercy. Then, one morning, his mother entered the kitchen early. She didn't look at him directly, just stood by the window, arms folded, eyes on the horizon. "You're leaving again soon?" she asked. Elian nodded. "Yes, just for a while." "Always off somewhere," she muttered. "Always in your own world." Elian said nothing. There was no anger in him anymore. Just the kind of ache you feel when you realize a door may never open. Later that evening, he placed the sealed letter on her nightstand while she was in the bath. He knew she would see it. He knew she might never read it. But it was no longer about what she would do. It was about what he had to say. In the letter, he wrote, "I know you never saw me as yours. I know I reminded you of everything you wanted to forget. I know I was a mirror you couldn't look into without pain. But I was always here, always waiting. Waiting for a moment, a smile, a soft word, a sign that I was more than just tolerated, that I was wanted. You never gave it, but I still thank you for feeding me, for sheltering me, for carrying me into the world. I won't ask you to love me, but if, on the day I leave, you can smile, just once, I will take that with me, and it will be enough." He signed it, folded it, and walked away. Elian passed in his sleep 3 days later. There was no hospital room, no tubes, no final cries, just a quiet exhale in the room where he had first learned to be invisible. The house woke to silence. His sisters knew. His father wept in a way only quiet men can deep, shaking, wordless. And his mother found the letter. She didn't open it immediately. She stared at it for hours, then days. When she finally broke the seal, it wasn't with trembling hands, but steady ones, like someone who knew exactly what they would find and feared it anyway. And when she reached the final lines, when she read those words, "If you can smile," she did. A single tear fell, not from sadness, but from the weight of something long denied. And for the first time, she whispered not to anyone, not to the room, not even to the letter, just to herself, "He was always mine." The morning of Elian's funeral arrived beneath an overcast sky, the kind of sky that doesn't rain, but keeps the light away, as if even the weather understood the weight of farewell. The house was quiet, not in mourning, but in reverence. For once, silence didn't mean denial. It meant presence. His father sat in the front row, shoulders rounded, hands clasped tightly in his lap. His 3 sisters sat beside him, their eyes red but open, holding each other's hands like they had never done before. The smallest gestures now carried meaning too large for words. The service was held at the university chapel where Elian had once given guest lectures about poetry and memory. His students had decorated the space with handwritten notes, pinned along the walls. Messages like, "You made me believe I mattered," and "You saw me when no one else did," filled the room like whispers from 100 grateful hearts. Elian had left behind a final instruction, a short request, not to be read by a lawyer or a priest or an official. He wanted his youngest sister still in school, still full of wonder, to read the last note he had ever written. She stepped to the front, trembling slightly, but clear in voice. She unfolded a single sheet of paper, Elian's handwriting unmistakable, and began, "To those I love. If you are reading this, then I am no longer in the room, but I am still here, in every book we shared, in every afternoon sunlight that sneaks through a dusty window, in every moment you remember something kind. I never asked to be different, but I never wished to be anyone else either. I lived quietly because the world around me was loud. I was called strange. I was called soft. I was called not our child. But I was also called sir, by students who believed in me. I was called friend, by people who felt safe in my presence. And most importantly, I was called son once by a man who never stopped trying to protect me in silence. That was enough. I leave you what I can, not land, not property, but peace. I hope it grows in this family like a tree we never planted before. And to my mother, I never stopped loving you, even when I stopped hoping. You once said I didn't belong, but I belong to myself, and that has always been enough." She paused. A breath passed through the room, and then the unthinkable happened. His mother stood. She didn't cry. She didn't collapse. She walked to the front, past the pews, past her daughters, past the photograph of the son she had never fully looked at in life, and she turned to face everyone. Her voice was hoarse, not from age, but from years of silence. "I called him many things," she said, "but never what I should have." She looked down at her hands, the same hands that had pushed him away so many times, then looked back up. His name was Elian. He was my son, and I loved him. The room didn't clap. It didn't gasp. It simply breathed, a collective inhale of truth long overdue. When the service ended, people lingered, not because they had to, but because they didn't want to leave the presence of something so raw, so redemptive. His students laid white flowers on the steps. His sisters hugged one another tighter than before, and his father, still seated, simply whispered. He waited his whole life for that. In the days that followed, Elian's scholarship fund received hundreds of donations, not in his memory, but in his honor. A wall at the university now holds his name beneath the quote from his final letter, "I belong to myself," and that has always been enough. And in the house he left behind, His mother kept the letter by her bedside, opened, folded, read too late, but not unread. What do you think is harder to say, "I'm sorry" or "I love you"? Why do so many people wait until it's too late? Follow Heart Stories for more stories that remind us some truths are silent until they are finally heard.